I've been wanting to make this video for a while, and by a while I mean that I mentioned I was intending to do this video this time last year. I also have a funny story that I want to make a video of at some point, although that probably won't be for quite a few months. But since it's the 4th anniversary of my first upload, there's no better time to finally make it. This is going to be a fairly unconventional video, since I dare say it's a storytime video, but not the kind of shit where I sit down in front of my computer and eat Whatsits as I'm trying to convince you to sympathise with me. No, this is a different kind of storytime video. This is me describing something that happened to me over the course of about a year, and if the title of this video is what I think it's going to be, then you already know where this is going. I did a genuine 5,000 word essay about anime, an essay which included 2 paragraphs on hentai, and I fear it may be the proudest I've ever been of anything in my life. But let me set the stage. In England, and I believe also in Wales, sixth formers are able to do a thing called an Extended Project Qualification, or EPQ. This is a project that students take throughout years 12 and 13, which will encourage them to either write a 5,000 word essay or create a quote-unquote artifact with an accompanying 2,000 word essay. No matter what they set as their goal, they will be documenting their process and any relevant sources to their final product. They can choose to write about basically anything, provided there's no overlap with their A-level or B.Tech subjects. At the end of all of this, you're also required to do a presentation which covers both the content of your project and how you went about gathering it. I'm going to say something semi-serious, and that is, if you are ever presented with the opportunity to do an EPQ, then I would recommend you grasp that opportunity. Unless you're doing 4 subjects, then there's really not many reasons you shouldn't at least have a go. If you're applying for university, a lot of places will lower their offer if you get a C or higher in your EPQ. And even if you're not applying for university, this is still a very useful thing to have on your CV, as it shows you demonstrate independence as well as the ability to plan and manage a project. And another advantage, although one that should hopefully not be at the front of your mind, is that it's easier to drop EPQ after a few months. Although, as I've said, this should be a last-minute resort, and you would not be able to reap the benefits should you do this. But now that I've given some actual useful advice, let's talk about how I managed to use this important academic opportunity to talk about anime kiddies. At our school, those who were doing an EPQ would be given a 15-minute class for learning some of the research tips that would be important to our project. However, in my first one, we were told to write down some of our first ideas. So, my ideas went as followed. What is something deep? The history of existentialism. What is something deep, but I also know about it? Cyberpunk. The genre, not the game. So, should I do an EPQ on cyberpunk in general? No, because this is 2018 and Cyberpunk 2077 still stands a chance of being released as I'm writing this essay. How about something about just cyberpunk works from Japan? Only cyberpunk media I know from Japan is anime. How about just cyberpunk anime? That would involve me being able to understand whatever the fuck Serial Experiments Lane was about. How about a different essay on anime in general? Nice! What's my question going to be? Dunno. Since the first thing they outlined in the intro to EPQ was that Wikipedia isn't a valid source, I had to find some citable books about anime. So I picked up The Soul of Anime by Ian Condry and The Otaku Encyclopedia by Patrick Galbraith. These were both helpful as secondary sources, and even as primary sources, since there are actually some interviews with fairly prominent figures within the anime and otaku spheres in these books. But I have to say that the Otaku Encyclopedia was fairly hard to read in public, mainly because this was the front cover, and some of the images inside the book are, well, interesting to say the bloody least. But by that point it was September 2019, and I was still in pursuit of a question with only 5 months to go. And this is where the good doctor comes in. Between February and July, the person acting as the supervisor for the EPQ students was one of the full-time teachers at our school. He was great, gave good advice, but when I came back in September, my EPQ group was given a different supervisor. This was a professor from a local university, who would sometimes come into our school to do a few classes on economics, as well as supervise our aforementioned EPQ sessions. And to put it lightly, he is the embodiment of chaotic good. On my first session with him, he came up to me and asked, "What's your project about?" "Oh, well, I was thinking about doing a project on anime." "Who is that?" At the time, I was trying to hold back laughter, but in hindsight, that might be the most accidental Chad move I've ever seen. So I tell him, "Well, it's a word that describes animation that comes out of Japan." "Oh, interesting that. You see, I was listening to this program on BBC Radio 4. He then continues like this for another 5 minutes, eventually coming to, "So anyway, maybe you should do an essay about how anime relates to Japanese culture." So there it was, my essay question. How does anime represent Japanese culture? And here's the advantage to choosing this question. I can use anime as sources, and as a result, my final bibliography had more sources than a spice shop. I feel this is the point where I should mention some of the content of my essay. I'm just going to quickly run down some of the more interesting sections of the essay. So, there's a part where I decide to mention that many seiyus have singing careers as well as voice acting careers, and often sing the openings to anime that they're starring. And I thought to myself, hey, how about I reference Renai Circulation? I mean, it's not like there's going to be any weirder references later on in this paper. Here's a weirder reference I had later on in this paper. I decided to do a paragraph on the moe phenomenon, in which I mentioned the famous 2008 petition where a man wanted to get a legally recognised marriage to Mikuru from the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Now, I consider myself a fairly tolerant guy, but upon hearing that news, I have to put my foot down. I like to be jokey, but frankly, this is disgusting and gross. We all know that Haruhi is a better wife. And frankly, a 5,000-word essay on anime would be incomplete without a reference to hentai, body pillows, or both. So I chose both. Not only was there a paragraph about when Jun Fukushima wore the Megumin Ducky Makura cover, but there was also a paragraph on the history of tentacle porn. Now, I'm saving an actual reading of this essay for a potential stream, but I will mention that when I was going over the essay with the good doctor, he was just scrolling through until he caught sight of that paragraph. He turned to me and said, I shit you not, for some reason I'm much more interested now that we've gotten to the bit about tentacle porn. Utter shag. But as I've mentioned, our EPQ wasn't just limited to our essay, because there was also... Just as the snake in the Ouroboros eats its own tail, we had to show prospective EPQ students a presentation about our projects to convince them to do an EPQ. When I went to see the previous years give their presentations, I knew that I needed to do an EPQ just so I could get to do one of these presentations and turn it into one long stand-up routine. And so I did just that. I prepared a presentation, and on the day I was the last presentation. Before mine, there was a presentation about the housing crisis, a presentation about advertising, and a presentation about mental health. All very serious subjects that all three of these people had done very serious research into. And I was after them with a presentation about Asian cartoons. I started off fairly well when talking about my topic. My audience seemed to like it, and I felt I was being informative. But I noticed that in this audience is the head teacher of my school, and this makes it slightly awkward, because the next picture up on my presentation is this. I then had to try and explain what a body pillow was and the appeal behind one in a way that wouldn't terminate my time at the school. At the end I took questions, and that would have been the end of my time presenting. But then the head teacher stood up. My heart stopped a little. But then they said, thank you, that was a very fun presentation and you sounded like you had fun making it. Now, I could have been normal and just have said, thank you. But for some godforsaken reason, I decided to reply by saying, I'm only acting. This was a reaction that surprised my head teacher. But not as much as it surprised me a second after realising those words escaped my mouth. However, after taking a few more questions about the EPQ process, that was that. After a tiny bit of revision to my paper, I handed it in. And that was the last I heard of it. Until... The part about this getting you decreased uni offers from the introduction wasn't a lie, because at the time I was going to interviews with several universities, and the majority of them reduced my offer after hearing about my EPQ. But then came my actual results. Because of some government buggery that occurred last year, the majority of my grades were marked down due to how exams were being done that year. However, this didn't apply to marks that were based purely on coursework. Like my EPQ. As it turns out, I got an A. I should mention that due to the way EPQs are graded, only 30% of the final grade comes from the essay itself, and the other 70% comes from evaluation and the student's display of academic skills. But still, an A is an A. In fact, it's highly likely that the university that did end up letting me in despite my grades initially being under their offer may have been convinced based on this result. Nice! I want to end this video on a bit of a reflective note. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing in the future, or if there's even going to be anything I can do. As I've mentioned, I've not been feeling the greatest as of recent, but despite all that, there's still a list of things I'm proud I've done, and towards the top of that list is this essay and this channel. And while I'm not entirely convinced myself at the moment, it's probably important to remain hopeful. And I hope that if things improve, maybe in a few years I'll earn qualifications. And with those qualifications, hopefully I'll get a job. I even hope I'll enjoy that job. But if I do get that good job, I hope that someone will ask me how I got there. And to them, I will reply this way. So let me tell you what a body pillow is.